Hey everyone, what's up? Thank you to both the Unix and Cryptofights community for watching the stream. I am Franz, and here with us today is Adam, if I'm not mistaken, and James. They will be with us for all throughout the AMA, and they will definitely share what wonderful project they are working on, which is Cryptofights. Later on in the AMA, before we wrap everything up, we will pick one of the questions from our community during the live stream, and the five best questions, of course, would win prizes. They will be cash prizes and NFTs coming from crypto fights themselves. So stay and tune in. Ask away any questions you might want to ask, and we'll pick the best five out of all of them. Without further ado, I'll give the floor to Adam and James here, and we'll have them introduce themselves.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, my name is Adam Kling, the CEO and founder of Fix Gaming, formerly known as Chronoverse, that you might have seen the video footage. And we have been working on Cryptofights for a long time, so some of that footage is old and some of it's new. We've been around since 2018, and I'm gonna go over to James. It's James Hoover. He's also the community manager. So James, why don't you take it away?
Hello, everyone. Just like Adam introduced, I'm the community manager, and I work with our community and help design the gameplay aspects of the game. And right now, our game is running on BSV, which is Bitcoin Satoshi Vision. And our main aspects are that we use the Dungeons and Dragons D20 dice mechanic, and that kind of gives us a nice edge to the crypto gaming realm.
All right, thank you, James and Adam. I know everyone's in the stream is very excited to know everything about the project that you guys are working on. As you said, you guys have started working on it 2018. Is that right?
Yeah,
Okay.
and I can give you kind of a overview of the kind of the timeline from when we started. So we started exactly in 2018, right around. I remember with Sky Mavis and Axie Infinity. I remember them
Mhm.
on the block and CryptoKitties and all that. CryptoKitties is actually how I actually got really into blockchain gaming because I was seeing that, and it was really, I think, a big inflection point for this really small niche kind of industry that was forming around blockchain gaming.
Yep.
And when I saw that, we were currently at that time when I kind of bootstrapped a small team and saw, CryptoKitties, a lot of these were web-based applications, and it was really like experimentation at that time. And I said, you know what, let's start thinking about using a game engine, and let's think about how we can, make this a lot better, right?
Mhm.
I've been a gamer my whole life, love gaming, and I was like, there's so many things we could do. But one of the big missing pieces at the time, if you think back in 2018, is that everybody was still trying to figure out what is going on, right? Like, how
Exactly.
do we actually do things? And I remember even myself using MetaMask and actually approving every transaction that I'm doing in gameplay. And I was like, there's no way this is gonna, work for, the mainstream. And that was really the thinking, is that this is gonna be the next big thing. It was just starting to be thought that way. So we were on Ethereum, and we were working with another company. I'm gonna keep them out right now because we're no longer with them. But
Mhm.
we basically spent a whole year of trying to figure out how to actually put gameplay on chain. Now, back in 2018, this was just maybe even late 2018. They were just starting to really, the whole thing about side chains or layer two was really starting to be thought about and just starting to maybe be implemented to experiment with. Because when we were really trying to figure out with Cryptofights how to make this thing work, is that we ended up having to create a lot of tools and kind of solutions to how we do this. And it always seemed to kind of get better, but then there open up more problems that we have to solve. And we were very, very small at the time, and we just didn't really see how this was really going to work. DApp Radar was showing usually like a couple hundred daily active users for these things. And I was thinking, well,
Mhm.
with Fortnite and all these things, we're talking in the millions. and obviously the user experience wasn't very good back then. So we ended up looking, as James mentioned, we looked. There was a kind of controversy going around Bitcoin SV because they were kind of splitting from Bitcoin Cash, which was a fork off of Bitcoin BTC, and we started looking at that. And again, Ethereum is very different than Bitcoin, right? Just kind of how you think about development. Ethereum has Solidity and smart contracts, and Bitcoin is just very different. It wasn't thought of as a kind of a development platform. So as we started looking more into that, one of our chief architects, David Case, started saying, you know what, this kind of solves a lot of the problems that we're facing with trying to actually put gameplay online. And we actually, around that time, our previous name was Chronoverse, and we basically took the kind of the god of time, Cronus, and the metaverse, and made Chronoverse to put them together, because we could see how actually a metaverse could start to form using, and this is a little nerdy, but when you think of Ethereum as an account-based system, kind of like a bank account, where a Bitcoin system is almost like cash. They call it a UTXO system, but I can hand you a transaction, and I don't have to involve like a global computer, to compute that. So we started to say, well, we can do a lot of things much faster. So we started kind of building our technology, and obviously with Cryptofights, and we've really come a long way. So we have, I don't know if in some of the footage, obviously the graphics and the gameplay has gotten a lot better. But what we've actually, I think one of the unique things about our project is that we're actually able to achieve layer 1 gaming. So what this means is that when you're on like Axie Infinity or some of these other games, is that you're typically utilizing, there's like a base layer chain, so Ethereum. But then they say, well, we can't compute or do transactions fast enough or pay, $16 in fees. So we have to go to another blockchain. And that other blockchain is typically very private. It's very centralized, but it's fast. Maybe it's proof of stake, and we can get into that if that's interesting. But when they do that, you really kind of disconnected from the blockchain at that point. And then they do all their gameplay or whatever they want to do, and then they report maybe outcomes or a bunch of things into like maybe one hash. So you really have disconnected from the blockchain. And so if you go back to 2018, the whole thinking back then was blockchain gaming, right? Is that we can think about Ethereum as a way to actually interact with games. It was this is an organism that exists kind of outside, and you're able to interact with these organisms, and you're maybe, you want to take some piece of this game and incorporate it into another game. So I think I think the industry in mass has really gotten away from the original kind of vision or dream of blockchain gaming. So we've tried to remain really pure in that sense. And so when I say layer 1 gaming, is that when you actually log into the game in Cryptofights, you're actually in a Bitcoin wallet. So think of it the same way as you do with MetaMask, and that when you actually make a move in Cryptofights, you're doing a transaction. And so every time someone makes a move, they're basically creating a Bitcoin transaction, and then those are basically computed by our servers. But we can't alter or do anything because these are Bitcoin transactions. So all we really are doing is computing what these things mean. So we're able to keep everything on layer 1, and everything kind of what I call proof of gameplay, is that we don't hide everything is essentially like in a time capsule at that point. So when we have our game, we can go back, like let's say it's 5 years in the future, we could go back to today. I could look up your username and see the games that you played today down to the move, right? And so when we think about esports and the massive amounts, the hundreds of thousands or millions of games that we have, imagine being able to go back and look at it almost like you can go into Google and search the results. So when we think about the metaverse, it's kind of one of the earlier concepts is that we need to actually have gameplay on chain, because things in this game might mean things to another game, right? If we've all seen Ready Player One, everything is connected. So when we have, like in our industry, in the blockchain gaming industry now, we have a lot of things in what I would call silos. Is you have Axie Infinity is on their own chain, right? And they have the huge responsibility of making that secure and decentralized, and they're not right now. And then you have other games that exist on maybe a layer 1, but then they utilize some kind of layer 2 solution. And then they have the responsibility of keeping that network secure and all that. But guess what? When you're in one of these silos, how are you going to go over to the other silo? You're going to pay a transaction fee, most likely, is what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's going to be a lot of friction that's going to develop. And so I don't see, I mean, you could argue that maybe the metaverse is really going to be destinations. Like there's going to be a Fortnite metaverse, an Axie Infinity metaverse. But I would argue that a true metaverse is the same thing that what the HTTP protocol did, how we're actually communicating right now, for the metaverse. Like it needs to be very open and permissionless, and we just need to be able to use that. And so Fixed Gaming is actually developing kind of the infrastructure and the protocol for these types of things to happen. And Cryptofights is really kind of our proof of concept for that. Now, as we get kind of more into this, I'm gonna tell you kind of where we're going next year, which is really exciting. But I wanted to leave that there to kind of give you an overview of kind of where we came from and where we are today.
Thank you so much for all of that, Adam. It's really awesome to hear that you guys have went through a lot since 2018, and seeing you now, it's just really great. You also said something about your inspiration behind the game. I think it was James. He mentioned about it being from D&D. Are there any other inspirations for this project?
Is that to me or to James?
To you.
The inspiration, when we were first starting, my background, I played a lot of like in the arcade days in the 90s, Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, Killer's Instinct. And I thought like a fighting game was pretty fun, sounding pretty fun. And so when we were first trying to figure out like what game to actually make, and again, even with the limited capability when we were on Ethereum at the time, is we actually thought of creating a fighting game where you kind of set up a fighter in advance. So, I want maybe like a dwarf with this weapon and this armor and maybe these stats, and then the opponent kind of does the same thing, and then you kind of throw them into battle, and then it just kind of, the smart contract would kind of compute what happens, and then you would just see the winner. So that's kind of how we kind of focused into that. The Dungeons and Dragons dice mechanics were brought by Abel, he was one of the first people on the team, and he made a bunch of games, and I think he was a dungeon master and was really well versed in D&D. And so he started coming up with kind of a part of the mechanics that we could use at the time. And again, that's kind of one of the things, is that from 2018 till today, like we've evolved in how ambitious we've been with the game, because of how, especially changing the blockchain we're using and what we can do, and we're not even really done yet. So so it kind of started with that concept, and then we kind of said, oh, well, now we can do like real-time decisions in there, so it's like actually turn-based. And then we added, well, let's let them pick a skill, and then there's some things in the future we're going to add, but we're starting to get more interactive kind of as we go because of the technology that we're trying to pioneer.
Yep. And it actually adds more complexities in the gameplay. I guess that's one of the outstanding features of the project. Can you tell us more if there are any strengths, edge of the project? Yeah,
I'll start with this, and I'm gonna let James kind of take that because he can get really in deep in that. But the kind of the general thinking about this is almost like chess. So there's kind of elements. So when you roll, for example, let's say you have your play style is like, I want to be more of a tanky character, I want to have a lot of hit points, but I want to be able to take a lot of damage, and maybe I have a great sword, right? So everything that you choose and how you kind of set up your character means something, because the opponent can counter that through maybe they want to have high evasion, so you can't hit them very well. But when they hit you, they might do a critical attack, so they do a lot more damage. You have, as I think James will explain more about the dice rolls, but you have to roll like an attack roll, which is just to see if you hit the person first. So it filters through like their evasion scores, and all of the other kind of stats and equipment that you have that can kind of modify your properties. But if you hit them, then you have to roll another dice to see how much damage you do. And so there's kind of this probability and a little bit of luck that can come into play. But over time, when you start playing a lot of these battles, the better players win more. because they can almost like out strategize the opponent, and you don't really know what you're going to get either. You don't, when you
Mhm.
go into matchmaking, you don't know who's going to come up and what kind of builds and weapons and spells, or we have like over 50,000 combinations of what you can do currently, and we plan to add more. So, over time, especially when we add tournaments, you kind of have to guess what people are going to bring in with your play style. But then when you go back in, they could switch their character out and be something else. So I'm going to switch over to James, and he can explain kind of more in depth on the deeper strategy, because he's actually been a really good player at it. So he can probably tell you how he's been so good, basically.
All right, go ahead, James.
So Adam did a nice roundup of that, but basically, as he was saying, we start with a dice mechanic, and you roll a 20-sided dice to beat your opponent's evasion, and that evasion score is based off of their dexterity. And you can, as you level up through playing through like the dungeon levels or fighting in other PvP combat and gaining experience, you can choose to increase your base stats, which are strength, dexterity, intelligence. And as the dexterity gets increased, the evasion can get increased. And then on top of that, you can equip armor to boost a damage resistance. So there's lots of mechanics that can become involved to make it harder for your opponent to hit you. But on the reverse side of that is you can, for like the greatsword user, he's going to be using his strength to determine his d20 dice roll on if they can break that armor or that evasion class. So as they level up, they're going to be putting their points into the strength and trying to get as much of that up as high as they can, so they have the most advantage to get through those high dexterity builds and the high evasion numbers. And then it just continues to step itself out, just like a chess match. You can then add skills into it. Like one of our most popular skills right now is a stun skill. So you can, if you land a successful hit on your opponent, then you stun them. So one of the skills is for like 1 turn, one of the skills is for 2 turns, and then they can't act for those turns. And so that kind of gives you an extra turn or two to maybe buff up your strategy a little more. One of another skill that goes into that is that specific strategy is charging. You can charge your character up so that way you can swing more than once in a turn to deal out additional damage. And there is always a counter to that. So like you can easily have your evasion be buffed up really high to where no matter if they have a high modifier to add into it, you'll be able to have a very good chance of them missing you, and as well as you can taunt them or demoralize them, which will make them roll additional d20 dice, but they have to use the lowest shown value of the dice, which just continues to add this back and forth and ebb and flow into the game. So as Adam was mentioning, there's this kind of nice, eloquent dance of what skills work the best against what other skills, what builds work the best against these other builds. And the best way to know that is to, just continually be playing the game, try to get yourself experienced with all the skills, all the different combinations of skills, and how those skills work best with the specific races. Right now we have 3 races, human, elf, and dwarf, and they all kind of start out with their own starting stats. Dwarfs are more hardy, so they start with a base resistance of a base damage resistance of 1, as well as they have 2 additional strength than the rest of the classes. And then elves have a higher evasion because they're more nimble. So they are higher evasion and a higher initiative. And the initiative is what determines on who goes first in combat. So the first part of combat is they both roll a d20, and those d20 get put against each other. And what gets added to that is your initiative modifier. So if I roll a 10 and my opponent rolls 11, they might beat me, but if they're a dwarf and I'm an elf, I get an additional 10 points to my initiative modifier. So my ending result number will actually be 20 versus their 11, which will in turn cause me to start first, which in that type of back and forth battle could be a very determining factor, because then if I'm for example, a stun user, I can stun them, and now I've had 2 turns to go before they've even gotten a chance to act. And those kinds of ebbs and flows are really what give us that good character development, good strategy in the game. And so far, we've had really good results from our community on them liking the play flow.
Yep. I mean, when you first look at the game, it really just looks simple. But if you take all of these things into consideration, you know, the debuffs, buffs, do you say also that we have the freedom to choose which stats we can increase, like the dex, strength, and intelligence?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So every other level we get to increase a stat, and then the other level in between that you get to pick a skill. So you'll be able to increase stats. On 2, on 3 you choose a new skill. On 4 you're
Exactly.
going in and picking that new stat again. And then every 2 points that you add into the stat gives you an additional +1 to the modifier of that stat. And that modifier is the number that goes into the dice rolls that are based off of those stat points.
Got it. I mean, a lot of MOBA games at the moment, they just really have a few meta and meta changes whenever there are new updates. But when I'm hearing Adam and James, you guys telling me about the game mechanics, I just realized that there's really a lot of freedom that players can do. Like I remember, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Ragnarok. Did you play that game?
A little bit. I didn't get too much involved.
I remember like I chose a mage character, but I purely added strength on the attributes. I mean, this kind of freedom can get you sometimes good results. So I guess my next question is, since we're already talking about the game, has is the player has way to test out characters, or do they have to grind one character to test out which meta would work best for them?
So we do have a dungeon mode, which is like a campaign that you can take. We actually have 2 of them currently. And so you can build your character and you can kind of test them against our bots in the dungeon mode. But obviously, just like going to the arcade, you're going to get more experience and you're going to have much of a more of an edge against an actual human player. So it kind of goes both ways. And we have a lot of players that tend to make 30 to 100 different fighters, just testing out those best builds and then trying to take that one that they refined over time into the PvP combat so that they can climb those leaderboards, because they want that, top ranking spot. Not only do they want the BSV that it pays out, but they want that top ranking spot.
Exactly. I mean, that's what I've guys. That's what I've been saying. Competitive wise, in terms of meta, there's really a lot of things that we can take into consideration before grinding the best character for us. As what James said, even other players test out 30 to 40 characters just to test out what strategies could they use, or if they would be able to see if there are any unknown strats or meta that they can play. Regarding the game, we've already discussed that the smart chain is under BSV, right? Yeah.
Yes,
Yes, that's
correct.
correct.
Yes, the smart
Yep.
chain is BSV.
So I know for a fact that BSV has lower gas fees, so this would really be a good thing too for players. But how much basically one does need to pay in order for them to start playing? or is this free to play?
Right now we are free to play. You don't need an NFT or to make a deposit. Obviously, making a deposit can get you started a little quicker because you can go onto our marketplace and buy the NFT items that drop from the dungeons from our players if they're listing them.
Mm,
So that can kind of give you a head start. But it also, if you're just buying items, you might not necessarily know what are those best items unless you're, have some D&D experience. But you can download the game, set up your account, and get right into playing the dungeons right off the bat.
got it. Can you discuss to us, James, what is the play to earn model of Cryptofights? Like usually games would get you loots wherein you can trade them in marketplaces. Some gives you tokens for daily quests.
Yep.
How
Yeah,
about
like
for Cryptofights? Yeah.
yeah. I'd like to take that. So right now, currently, I want to make a good distinction is that what the viewers are downloading right now, consider that kind of like our 1.0 version. And right now in 1.0, as James mentioned, that we have essentially our dungeon mode. And so that's when you first start your character, which is for free. Everything is essentially free to play. That you can go in and you can practice in the dungeons, build up your character and say, you know what, I don't really like this play style. You can go create a new character for free and try that, the dungeon mode again, which we have two of. We have a forest campaign and a snow campaign right now that you go through and you fight all these different monsters. Now, when you hit certain levels, you can actually go into our battle portal, which is PvP. So that you're going to actually pay a small entry fee to go in there, and you get matched with another opponent, and then you're going to battle it out, and then the winner is going to actually take 90% of that pot home. So you can actually, if you actually look at our leaderboard, you'll see that people are making hundreds of dollars every week by just competing in the PvP arena. So we have also a marketplace that he mentioned where every time that you, whether it's in the dungeons or in PvP, when you win, we actually have a loot drop. So you have a treasure chest and it opens, and we have what we call like loot tables. So you have, if for example on this arena has a higher entry fee, you're gonna have a better chance of maybe getting a rare or an epic item, and that could be armor, it could be a weapon, it could be a headpiece. Or same thing in the dungeons. When you beat those monsters, you get a loot drop, and those are NFTs. And you mentioned low gas fees. That's how we can do that. I mean, we're talking maybe 10 thousandth of a penny to drop you an NFT that you can then go into a marketplace and list for sale. And we also have a functionality where you can actually what we call melt them, where you essentially destroy them, and we have a teeny little bit of cash value depending on what the item is that can actually go into your account. So I'd like to just lay out that that's kind of what currently exists now. But if we can transition, next year there's some big things that we have in the works for Cryptofights. I don't want to sell too much of it now until we release our new websites that are going to be most likely coming in January. But we have a completely new kind of tokenomics-based system that's going to be coming to Cryptofights, where we're going to add in a lot more depth to the gameplay. One of the teasers I can leave out, I think, is that item crafting. Is right now items kind of drop complete. In the new version, we want people to build items. And that means we might have a blacksmith, we might have enchanting, and we're going to have a whole new item meta, essentially. So not only will you have essentially the gameplay meta about, what race of a character do you pick, how do you build that character, what weapons do you equip, what spells and actions and traits. You're also going to be able to do that on the item level, is how your item actually operates in battle. We also wanted to increase a lot more of the economics of the game, is to give a lot more ways for the players to earn more. And so we're actually going to, I think you can look at almost like a vendor class, is that when you want to just grind in the game, maybe again, the dungeons, is that you can actually get, we can say ingredients that are going to be used for other people that want to maybe go fight in PvP. The nature of our game is very competitive. So we're going to basically kind of put that to the max in our next version, where we're going to have things like really leaderboards, tournaments, and a lot more ways to basically earn by being a good player. So there's a lot more coming soon. So when players are playing now, to James's point, like if you get really good, you can still make money in PvP and you can still grind and make money that way. But if you're on the ground floor from when we release 2.0, let's call it, you're going to have a lot of advantage because one of the things that we've been in development for a long time on the technology that we're building and also the infrastructure to support layer one gaming like this. But we don't want kind of the big hype around kind of our proof of concept. When we start releasing, the actual 2.0 game, it's going to be competing with the likes of like Axie and a lot of these other games because of the depth that James talked about. So when we really start going big, this is the opportunity to get on the ground floor, especially if you go and join our community and start learning the game, that you're going to have an advantage and also be one of the first people to know about kind of what's coming next.
Thank you, Adam. Really nice to hear that the project also incentivize good players. I mean, people really have to be good at the game, especially that each PvP, I guess, they have to put in a little bit of money, and
Yeah,
each
when they
match.
go into when they go into PvP, there's depending on, so each arena has its own entry fee to go in. So think of it as like a tournament arena, okay? Is that when you say, I want to go put in my entry fee, and someone else is going to do that, and then we match make, and we have a smart matchmaking algorithm that's going to try to pair you as best as possible to like skill and like items. And you're going to fight it out when you get matched, and then the winner will take 90% of that pot. So it's essentially, it's the skill gaming part of that. Is that, if you're going to maybe go into a boxing ring or a baseball ring or a soccer ring, it's trying to get, whether it's right now it's 1v1, maybe in the future it'll be, team-based, but is you're going to be able to fight that person and use skill, right? Because, I mean, even when James is talking, it kind of shows that there's a lot more going on. It's easy to get into because it can look kind of simple, but as you start to level up and you have a lot more choices to make, not only with how you even come into battle with your character, but also, which wasn't really expressed too much, is that we actually have traits which are passives. So you could say, I want to have like a passive trait that maybe gives me more evasion just all the time. Or maybe I want to act on a skill that's just for this turn. And so all of the decisions that you make in the game can affect the outcome, right? So there's a lot of thinking and strategy involved in this. And the good players over time are the ones that make the most money. And again, we try to match you with a people of like skill. So that's really kind of the whole point of this when we think about kind of esports on the blockchain, is going back to what I said earlier, is that every move that you make is we have a thing called a battle explorer in the portal when you sign up, that you can actually see your battle and every single move that happened onto it. And we actually, we're going to bring it back, but we even have a thing called like a render pipeline where we can actually make a video of the match that you played, because the data is on the blockchain. So we can render it back through the game engine and play the video of your match. So remember, going back to the Google example, is that I want to go back a year ago and see like maybe my first battle. We can actually do that. We can actually show you that first battle in like an MP4 video. Because we can render it. Again, that goes to that permanent time capsule concept, is that everything that you do in Cryptofights is on the blockchain forever. And that's a really cool concept, because maybe, in the future, like when we start thinking about the metaverse, is that you have to maybe play 100,000 battles in Cryptofights to unlock a quest in another game in the metaverse, right? So we actually can prove that you've done that. And they can actually calculate all the battles that you've been onto without our permission, because it's on the blockchain. So anyways, I might have gotten a little off topic, but there's some really cool things that we're kind of working on and thinking about. And I'm really excited for January when we start announcing a lot of this stuff, which is why I'm so happy that Unix and Cryptofights are in partnership now, so we can bring this to your users and really grow together.
Yeah, I also personally think that Cryptofights it has a lot of potential, knowing how James and you have introduced the gameplay, the game mechanics, including just for the being competitive. You also said that all transactions are recorded even a year later. It also adds up in security, I guess, because in the competitive scene there are still hackers, lying around. So at least it would help up in terms of security. Now, going with the tokenomics of the game, can you give us an overview?
Yeah, I don't want to tell you too much yet because we have kind of a big reveal coming very
Exactly.
soon. So I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
want to kind of jump the gun too much. But what I can kind of tease as much as possible. I got to be careful, but we are looking at a new tokenomics-based system. Um, Several months ago, I don't even remember how long ago, really started looking at that because again, when we first started, we were really thinking like putting gameplay on chain. But ever since then, a lot of games have come out with their own tokens and kind of created their own kind of tokenomics, ecosystem. And we were trying to kind of build that on with just using, think of it just like using Ethereum, right? Like we didn't need our own token at that point. But as I started to kind of look and see what they're doing differently, we started to kind of come around to that concept. So we started basically building that vision of the 2.0 model. And we have, trying to think what I can tell you. We have kind of a lot more tokenomics coming out. We have a white paper that we're going to be releasing. It's done. Just can't show you yet because it's going to link on the new website, the new Cryptofights website that's coming soon. And people are going to be able to read essentially what's coming with the new version of Cryptofights, all the things that we're going to add. We're adding a lot more lore and story behind the game. We do have a token coming out. I can't tell you that. And that token is actually going to be more for also with Fix and potentially future games that could be running on the platform. So there's really that metaverse perspective that we really started to kind of re-embrace because we actually were thinking about that years ago when it wasn't popular, and now it's popular, and we're like, okay, maybe we can be inside of this wave and not be kind of too early. You don't ever want to be too early when no one cares about it. But so when we release that, like I said, I think it's probably in early to mid-January, we're going to launch the new website. And that's going to show a lot more information about how the tokenomic system is going to work. But there's going to be the people that are playing, the game now. There's going to be so much more to the game. I mean, it's just dramatic about how much we're going to add in there. And it's not even just the game. In the portal where you register your account, James mentioned the marketplace. So we have an NFT marketplace right now. We've done an intellectual property deal with a comic book universe from Zenoscope. So they basically, and some of that was in the intro video, but they have a lot of comic book characters that we've actually created NFTs around, but actually gave those NFTs utility by having them usable in the game. So they're really like skins. So skins are NFTs that are from, this other universe that are actually coming in our game. So you can go in there. We have, I think, 3 characters for sale right now, and there's more coming into the future. All of your Cryptofights items, and we're going to eventually be allowing people to create their own NFTs. And it might even get to the point to where your NFTs can be usable in game that you create. So there's this is really not just a game. This is really kind of a whole ecosystem and universe that we're trying to build using a technology that we don't have to worry about transaction fees. The average transaction fee is probably maybe 3 or 4 10,000ths of a cent. So we can do, I'd have to get a calculator out, but I mean, we can do thousands and thousands and thousands of transactions before we reach like $1. And when we can do that, then, all of these other games that they're saying, well, we have really, really cheap transactions, it's because they're on layer 2 and they're very centralized. And then when they report to Ethereum, they're paying, a couple of bucks to over $10, depending on the network, to record what what's happened. And we're doing that all together. So your NFT transfers, your gameplay, and potentially like the metaverse that's how we think this is really going to happen, is that there is no kind of reporting back or anything. It's just everything you do is just on chain. So when we release 2.0, I think it's going to really expand. I mean, we're doing millions of transactions a day on chain. So we're doing more transactions a day than Ethereum, for example, the entire blockchain of Ethereum, just for our game. And what I think is going to happen, especially with this new 2.0 version, is that we're going to be in the billions. And we're going to really challenge the narrative about all of these other kind of scaling solutions that are happening on Ethereum. Is that why do we need them at that point? And so that's a lot of the technology that we've been pioneering over time. We're kind of keeping our heads down and saying, let's figure out how to put massive amounts of transactions and data on chain. And if we're able to do that, then we've kind of solved layer one gaming for the blockchain,
Yep.
right? And so then we can have thousands and hundreds of thousands of games,
Exactly.
and we're into the trillions and tens of trillions and hundreds of trillions of transactions. And what that does for all of the kind of the blockchain people that are watching is that the fees generated by our game and all these other games are going to be what incentivizes the miners, not the price of the coin. Is that we're going to be paying, just like when you do a credit card or a bank transaction, is we're paying a very, very, very small little microtransaction, right? And that little bit of fee is enough for the entire blockchain ecosystem to be profitable for miners and all that. And then what we start to have is what in our community we call the metanet, but it's a new form of internet that can basically be born from that. And so all of these games and all that can interact with each other. So with all of the platforms, I don't want to name names, but the platforms that are building, we want to have games that can interact. Like I want our game to interact with Axie, but it can't. I want to be able to interact with games like Cryptofights characters can go into these other games like just automatically. And so that's kind of where we're going with the grand reveal that we're going to come out with in January with our direction.
Thank you so much, Adam. With that being said, we're gonna pick some questions in the live for everyone here. Let me just refresh our live stream and see what are in the comment sections below. Yeah, we have our first question from Gav. I think this was not mentioned as well on the AMA. Are the upcoming NFTs purely cosmetics, or will there be like added buff effects, stats, attributes whatsoever?
It depends. If they're talking about the Zenoscope stuff, those are what we call illusions, and those are skins. It doesn't change how your character performs, like based on the stats. But what we do have is like each item, like so those rewards that are given when you win, each item can actually have buffs. So for example, if you get like a rare item, you can get buffs on that. So where you can get those bonus modifiers that James mentioned. You can get a +1 on strength or dexterity or whatever it is, or maybe even fire damage, for example. So yes, we do have NFTs that do have buffs, and that's kind of part of the meta, is that you want to get good items so you can be more powerful in battle.
Okay, thank you. Another question from Marie, an interesting question. The community of gamers is really big. What strategies will Cryptofights execute to bring non-crypto gamers to your platform?
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah, that's something that again brings me back to 2018 about just how blockchain really shouldn't be a part of the mainstream gamer does not really like blockchain as far as I understand, because they don't understand it. I mean, we're so early in this that I think that probably the best strategy is to not talk about blockchain and just have a really easy experience for them. So for example, when Ubisoft came out with Quartz, they got a lot of flack from mainstream gamers about how now that you've integrated NFTs and blockchain, because when they think of NFTs, they think of kind of all the hype and like the $100,000 NFTs and all that stuff, and they're like, they think it's a scam. And so I think what the winning strategy is going to be, in my opinion today, is to actually just not talk about it at all and just say, well, hey, you can play the game, you can get items, but hey, maybe in this wallet or this account that you have, you can transfer it to your friend. Well, they can do that on Steam. But as they start to do these things, they'll start to discover, well, I don't need that game's permission to do that, right? Or, when I sell that item and I make money, like that's really good. I like that idea, right? And so, our community is really focused on, giving power to the gamer and owning their own assets and all that kind of stuff. And I think those are very universal things. But when we stick the technology in front of their face, they can't get through that. It's hard to understand this stuff. I mean, I think our watchers have kind of been in this for a while, that we forget that, if you just discover this, on day one, it's really overwhelming to understand this kind of new digital property, concept. So with our system, for example, right now is that you create an account with a gamer ID and you set a password. You log into Cryptofights with that same user ID and password, right? You don't have to worry about wallets and other things. You just go straight in and do that. Same thing with our website, same with the game. Remember, the game is the wallet. When you log into the portal, it's the wallet. It's a non-custodial wallet. It's literally like you're operating your own Bitcoin wallet. So that's kind of part of our strategy is to make it as easy as possible and non-technical as possible for players to be able to do everything, essentially. Now, the one thing I think kind of with the banking system that kind of sucks right now is that, if you have a credit card or a bank account or whatever, it's really hard to get in kind of fiat money or government money into a crypto world right now. But there's a lot of companies that are coming out with solutions to make that a lot easier. They're making, like the, showing your ID during the process a lot easier now and so on. So I think those systems are going to probably within the next year or two get a lot better to where the on-ramp with money is going to be a lot easier to get inside, to where you don't have to create an exchange account, for example, to get in. I think that needs to come up a little bit better solutions. But in terms of the gameplay, yeah, I mean, we're definitely really thinking about making it very easy for players right now.
Okay, thank you. We have the third question from Snoopy. Did the COVID pandemic affect your line of work? And how did you manage to pull it off?
That's probably a bad question because it didn't affect us at all. We're a globally remote team. So I would say, I guess I could say it affected certain people differently, locally because of the lockdowns and things like that. But, we all work from our computer. So we didn't really have kind of a disruption in that sense. I know some people on our team did get sick, but they were able to kind of recover, and we didn't have to worry about people getting infected in the office or anything like that, because we're all remote. So we had a little bit of an advantage in that capacity. And I think we also knew that gaming kind of went really big during that time, a la Axie Infinity, right? Where they had a huge jump, especially this year. Because people wanted to play games and be able to earn money because of their local economy and stuff. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think we really had much of a disruption in our team.
Got it. One question from Lamiha. Are there any plans for adding guilds in the game, and what would we expect?
Yes, we've been talking to obviously some guilds like Unix and some others. We are definitely very mindful of how to operate with guilds, and I think the partnership with Unix is going to pave the way for that. We have some ideas about how to actually create a better guild system for them, so they can actually operate a little bit better. We also want to make it a little bit easier. I don't personally want to price people out of playing the game, and making things too expensive. So I think we'll have a lot easier access compared to other games. But when it gets into maybe that high level gameplay where there's a lot at stake, and how the guilds can interface with that is we want to basically learn, the best way for how guilds can operate, especially when we get into, I think, the new term like GameFi. Is being able to leverage your assets in kind of the DeFi markets and so on. Is we have all the capability in the world to do that, especially with the technology that we run on, to make it as easy as possible for them to integrate with our ecosystem, essentially.
Got it. And I guess one last question from Harry. There we see many projects that claim they are fully decentralized, but they did their work in a centralized way. How can we be sure that Cryptofights is fully decentralized? Can you tell us what your method will be?
Yeah, so it comes down to how decentralized is defined, right? So back in maybe 2018, the concept of decentralized to me, when I was looking at it, is that you literally operated with the blockchain. But you know what a lot of people didn't know is that with MetaMask typically operates off Infura, which is kind of an API system to kind of integrate all of the servers and technology to actually access the data on the blockchain. So that was very centralized. It was like a centralized pipeline to go to a decentralized blockchain. So when we talk about decentralized and what kind of fixed gaming is doing, is that think of what's decentralized is like when you make that move in the game, that's a Bitcoin transaction. So that's kind of like, think of it almost like a packet. And that packet is like it's locked with your private key, and we can't alter it, we can't change it, we can't do anything with it. But what we are doing is saying, okay, well, for us to be able to operate, within milliseconds, is that we need to see that transaction quickly. And so that transaction is going to go to one of the nodes that we operate on, right? And so you think all the different players and they're sending it into fixed gaming, but think of that almost that data that's coming in from all these players as something that it's immutable. We can't touch it, we can't alter it. It's time stamped. So we have kind of this this locked data that's coming into us that we can validate and process and update like what's happening in the game, and then basically tell all the players what's going on so they can make their next move and whatnot. And as that happens, you got to think like maybe that's not purely decentralized because you're not interfacing with a blockchain, but no, nothing is, just so you know. But so we have almost like maybe a hybrid approach, is that, and this is why this works better than most of these others on layer one, is because Ethereum and all these other ones, they're called an account-based system where they have like a global computer computing everything that every transaction is computed, and that's very slow and costly. And it might not even be decentralized depending on what chain you're looking at. So what we're doing is essentially saying, let's take the data in from the players. So think of like a check, you write who it's to, maybe like a fraction of a penny, and then in the memo field you put like what your move is in the game, and then you sign it, and that's being sent off to fixed gaming. And then fixed gaming say, okay, I have all these moves coming in, and we're computing what that means in the game, and then we're broadcasting it to get mined. So it's on the blockchain. And so this system is how I think the metaverse is going to work, is that you have to be able to compute things within milliseconds. I mean, first person shooters, things that with a ton of actions going on, it has to be quick. And I think, this is more decentralized than what's going on in a lot of these other projects, because it's all layer one. It's all on a decentralized proof of work blockchain, right? So hopefully that makes sense and that answers your question.
No worries. I think that wraps everything up with the AMA today. You guys have any thing to say to all of our viewers within the Unix community and the Cryptofights community watching the stream right now?
Sure. Well, I want to I'd say our team at Fixed Gaming is very excited to be working with Unix Gaming, and it's been great. We started introducing ourselves before the token launch, and we had a great token launch and many good things planned. And I'm looking forward to especially this AMA that we've done and more into the future. Please go join our community. I think that link is on the screen. James will be able to greet you in there and get you going with how to play best and how to even earn currently right now. And make sure you're signed up, especially with all our socials, so you can learn about what's coming in a matter of weeks now. This isn't very long, in January, right? Of all the new things that are going to be coming with the game, and you can really kind of be one of the pioneers of layer one gaming and help us really prove out that concept.
Thank you. We really are excited because you've never informed us all the information regarding the new update. Yeah. Anyways, for all the viewers or all the winners for today's AMA, we'll reach out to Cryptofights, see how you guys can claim your prizes. And I think that's it.
All right. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adam. And thank you so much as well, James. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. And we'll see you in the next AMA.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are we